pride in helping people through tough times. And finally, Gustav Goos, a life coach and international corporate consultant who has worked closely with our team, even helping us through the emotional toll of COVID-19. Gustav, when you started working with people struggling financially, what surprised you the most?
Neil, I think the first thing is that how easy it is to fall into debt. The second thing is that when people get stuck, that they don't ask for help. It is so logical when you get stuck in your car, you always ask for help, but why don't they ask for help? Probably because of the third thing, and that is because the stress actually caused your rationality to go out of the window. So because their decision-making become impaired in this whole process. Then the other thing that surprised me was that how people use their creativity for all the wrong reasons, to pay this credit card with another credit card or so.
Exactly.
Instead of using it constructively to address the problem. But the one thing that really surprised me the most was the fact that there are some people that were so deep in trouble, but that they had the right attitude. And sometimes you actually thought, is this person going to make it? But with the right attitude and the right action plan, that they actually made it, that they could turn every threat into an opportunity. And that is actually the best surprise that I had in dealing with this.
And that is exactly why we're doing this. Whether you are a professional, a parent, or someone just trying to keep the lights on, this conversation is for you. Debt review is not about failure. It is about
eventually.
You have helped thousands of South Africans through this process. When do you think most people finally reach out? What makes them say, that is it, I need help?
I think the thing that we see most is it's not always just about when the figures don't balance anymore. Sometimes it's more the emotions. It's those sleepless nights where people are really stressed out about how they're going to pay their debt. Where's the next meal going to come from? The phone that rings, the constant nagging for payments, etc. Or even something as small as not being able to buy school shoes or do a proper grocery shop. It's a very emotional decision a lot of times, but I always tell people we've got to remember there is an element attached to it where people tend to think that it's something they did. They were wrong. It's tell them it's not your fault. The global economy, the local economy is in such a state where consumers who were fine a couple of years ago, right now are in a very, very difficult situation. And it's not because of something they did. It's factors beyond their control. But knowing that there is a lifeline, there is a way to work your way out of this debt and prevent this complete snowball of your debt at the end of the day.
Is there a difference between debt review and debt counseling? I hear people using both terms.
Not at all. It's exactly the same thing. It's terminology that just gets used interchangeably, but it's the exact same process under the National Credit Act.
Stefan, debt review is a legal process, and yet many people do not realize just how much protection it offers. Can you explain what happens legally once
reputable debt counselor. The reason for this is that if the debt counselor follows the process correctly, you are totally protected. Your car can never be repossessed until the court is pronounced upon your rearrangement application. However, in my practice over the years, I've come across many unscrupulous debt counselors who do not refer matters to court in time. And I must explain that
process when you've applied. They start communicating with your credit providers immediately. Your repayment plan kicks into place, which means from the end of that month, you stop making your new repayments, which means that that provision is made in your living expenses for your normal groceries, for example, and your school fees and your rent, etc., and that you avoid that debt spiral because you don't have to make payments directly to your creditors as per your original credit agreement because it's busy being renegotiated. So pretty much immediately.
Wow, that's amazing. What kind of debts can be included and what cannot?
So all your debts with your registered credit providers can be included, and that's what makes South Africa's National Credit Act so unique, is the fact that home loans get included as well, which means your home gets protected, which is something that makes us very unique and is probably the biggest reason why somebody with an asset would want that kind of protection, is taking care of your hard-earned asset that you've worked, paid off so much on already. And then things that can't be included would generally be, for example, if you owe SARS money, you can't include that under debt review. Municipal debt, because usually that's an ongoing monthly expense. So those kind of things can't be included. But if it's with a registered credit provider, that has to be included as part of your debt review.
It is interesting what you said about your home loan being placed under debt review because, how wonderful is that? We're the only country in the world where your home loan can be placed under debt review. So this act helps you to protect your home, even though you have fallen behind on your payments.
Absolutely.
It is like you're getting stuck in your car, either in the mud or in the sand. So it totally stops your life. And that gives rise to enormous anxiety because you cannot reach your normal destinations. And that whole anxiety cycle results actually in stress, obviously, but also a person can become aggressive. If you still have fighting energy, then people are very often aggressive in their relationships. But when the energy turns on yourself, it becomes depression. And then people are really depressed in the situation because I cannot do what I have to do. The biggest other effect is also the question on your self-worth, because people connect their self-worth to their financial worth. But it's not only that, it is also this, they said, I can actually work myself out of this thing, but all my devices are not successful. So I actually lose face to myself. So my own self-worth goes down. So these are all internal processes that you struggle with. But there's also the interpersonal processes. And because of the social status that you're afraid that you're going to lose, and perhaps the shame, people isolate themselves. And also, there's an old saying, when the money goes out of the front door, the relationship goes out of the back door. So people lose relationships, and it's really relationship stress in this situation. The only good thing that happens here is very often a person is in debt because of other people who abuse you, didn't have the boundaries to manage your money, and they use you to buy them all sorts of stuff. Now, when your money dries up, you lose all those friends. So that's the only good thing, that you lose all the bad people abusing you in all of this. But to summarize, it is triggering the whole stress response, that you're anxious and that you've got stomach problems and you've got relationship problems and you've got headaches and all those things. So all the stress triggers are triggered by the whole question of debt because it paralyzes your life.
What are some of the emotional signs that someone is carrying too much, even if they are still keeping up the appearances?
I think the emotional signs are very, very interesting. The emotional signs are that people are really pulling back, they're losing their typical behavior. You know this person, you say this person is not him or herself. And you cannot separate emotions and your physical side. So you first see health deteriorating. Then you see people are not themselves. But then you also see it on a spiritual side. So the psychological side is the person is actually losing faith in his ability to do things. But the danger thing is if you go to the spiritual side, that people lose hope. And the one thing I'm always very worried about is that some people try to take the easy way out. So instead of going for help, that I'm trying to walk off the field. And the last thing, and may I just make that appeal, the last thing that you must do is do not consider suicide. Because a lot of people, they lose physically, metaphysically, they lose hope. And the one thing that they must not do is that, because hope is available. There is a plan available.
Definitely, and suicide is a very heavy topic, but I can just mention that we have had people coming to Debt Rescue telling us that they have considered it and they have actually made a decision to go that route.
years where they've been trying to find solutions, find other plans, and not knowing that there is an actual solution in the form of debt review, and that they are so stressed out and so completely lost. And you know, what's absolutely beautiful is the amount of times we've had calls where I'd speak to somebody and they say, the relief I'm feeling of I'm being heard, there is a plan, there's a solution. And it's just so absolutely enlightening for them to know that they're not alone, there is a solution, but more than that, somebody's listening. There's somebody actually sitting on the other side who hears, who understands, who's got the empathy, but who's also got a solution. And that reminds us that these are real people with real lives, real pressure, but there's real hope for them as well.
You often say that the biggest relief is not just financial, but the feeling of someone finally saying, we've got you.
Indeed, and it's the financial element is obviously what's the trigger. That's what makes people reach out for help. But because it becomes such an emotional burden, having to deal with these solutions about how am I going to put food on the table? Do I still have a credit card that's got a couple of rand left that I have to make that decision? Do I spend it because we need food, or do I have to hold back, etc.? All this stress that they've been facing for so incredibly long just starts falling away because they can breathe again. They can literally say, I know how I'm going to afford food this month. I know I'm honoring my debt repayments, but I'm doing it in a manner in which I can afford to do so, and I'm not going to lose any of my assets. Expenses. The process works in such a manner that you get that relief, you are able to afford your groceries again without getting into that debt spiral. And you are working towards that plan of ultimately finishing your debt, repaying it, and walking out debt-free at the end of this.
How quickly do clients start to feel a difference in their monthly budget?
Immediately. And that's what we absolutely love, is the fact that consumers at the end of that first month, when they make their debt review payment, they no longer have to worry about their normal credit payments that they would have to make, because they're now paying that single installment monthly towards the debt, all of their debt, and they get that legal protection. So in other words, no more stress about how am I going to afford the food, how am I going to afford the school fees, because your budget's already provisioned for that.
That is amazing. And coupled with that, I suppose, what is also wonderful is the protection that you immediately start to get.
And that's correct. So the moment you apply for debt review, you are immediately protected, whether that first payment is only on the 25th and today is the 12th. From the 12th, you're protected. So no credit provider can start legal action for 60 business days after you've applied. So you've got that protection, and that 60 days is purely for the purpose of making sure you make your payments every single month and that your matter proceeds in the manner in which it does. And if it's supposed to, it works as it's supposed to, and you're making your payments, etc., your protection continues. So immediate relief for you in form of how you pay and protection.
What does a successful journey through debt review look like?
A successful journey for debt review is obviously getting that relief right at the beginning, finding that ability to repay less every month, be able to breathe, get out of that debt spiral. And when you're done, when you've paid off your debt, getting that clearance certificate, re-entering the credit market if you so wish, and if you want to in the future, buy a house, buy a car, whatever it is you need to do, but becoming debt-free. That is what a successful debt review is ultimately.
Stefan, once the proposal is made, what happens in the legal space?
Well, Neil, firstly, I've got to describe what the role of the debt counsellor actually entails. A debt counsellor is a neutral functionary of the court. So one must see a debt counsellor as an extension of the court. The court ultimately decides what is fair, and that's only in the instance where the parties themselves cannot decide. So the debt counsellor, as a neutral functionary of the court, will put up a proposal to all credit providers. The debt counsellor must determine whether the consumer is bona fide, in other words, acting in good faith, and also whether a proposal can be put together that does make economic sense. If the debt counsellor comes to this conclusion and the proposal is presented to all credit providers, they have the time, the 60 days that we've now discussed, to consider it and to negotiate. And debt rearrangement may be effected either by agreement between the parties. That'll be a situation where the credit providers all accept the proposal. Alternatively, it can be brought about also by way of an order of the court. And that is where the 60-day period, once that lapses, and if all credit providers didn't accept the proposal at the time, the magistrate in court then has to decide on whether or not the proposal is fair. And what's of importance here is, once a court finds that a consumer is indeed over-indebted, that consumer becomes entitled to debt rearrangement. So the question is not whether or not my debts will be rearranged if I'm a consumer. The question is simply, how will it be rearranged the moment that I qualify as being over-indebted as a consumer?
That's very good news. Can creditors still take legal action against you?
Well, Neil, the Act provides a complete defense against legal action. If you are under debt review, or in fact, as the Act puts it, if you approach the court as a credit provider during a time when the matter is before a debt counsellor. Now, initially, 15 years back, this was tested throughout in our courts, and the law is now tried. Once you as a consumer apply to a debt counsellor, there's the moratorium that we've spoken about for 60 days, and as long as your matter is pending in court thereafter, then a credit agreement may not be enforced against you.
How important is it to work with a reputable debt counselor?
Well, Neil, I think I've alluded to this already in the beginning of our conversation, but maybe I must just explain that, like yourself, I've been in the industry from the onset, and initially I took on a lot of debt counselors as clients. And I can tell you from personal experience that the quality of your debt counselor is of utmost importance in this process. Especially initially, we saw that a lot of people entered into this new industry, in my opinion, for the wrong reasons. A lot of people wanted to make a quick buck, so as to put it. And you need to find a debt counseling company that's in it for the long run, that values the fairness. And one must remember what the debt counselor's role is, and that is to find a fair solution for the credit or for the consumer's financial problem. Very few companies, in my opinion, over the years, are focused on exactly this. And for that reason, you've got to do your research, and you've got to apply to a reputable debt counselor.
Annelien, what are some of the biggest misconceptions people have about debt review?
I think there are three that I tend to see. The first one is that people think that debt review is a blacklisting. It's not. It's just a flag on your credit profile whilst you're under debt review to prevent you from getting further debt. And there's a very good reason to this. It sounds quite one of those things that you go, ooh, okay, that doesn't sound good. But the purpose of debt review is to get out of debt. So credit providers are not allowed to give you debt, so that places obviously a legal responsibility on them. So that's why that flag is there. It's not for any other purpose other than becoming debt-free without getting additional debt. The second one, I think, is a really big concern is the fact that people remain concerned that they can lose their assets. And as we've now spoken extensively, your assets are protected. You cannot lose your house or your car as long as you abide by the monthly repayments that your debt counselor has negotiated. You are completely protected. And the third one that we see a lot is that people seem to think is, I'll never be able to get credit again. And that we have seen time and again. Once that clearance certificate is issued, consumers go out, they buy a new home, they buy a new vehicle if they need to. You absolutely can get credit after you have completed the debt review process.
What a relief. When is the moment clients start to believe that they are going to be okay?
I think the moment is usually when the calls stop happening, the credit providers stop harassing them, they're not being contacted, and they make that first payment and they see, okay, this process is real, it really works. And then as they progress through it, they start seeing, okay, well, the balances are coming down, it's now an order of
Full life. with a new life plan. That is the beauty of this situation. But the first starting point is tension relieving. But then I entice people to go for the full Monty, goal achieving, to return to a life lived to the full and not only debt-free.
Do people underestimate how much emotional energy they are spending trying to survive?
You know, I always say there are 5 levels of living, from sinking to survival. I mean, you struggle, you fight for breath. I mean, you just want to get your head above the water, and one wave will actually take you down under again. So the 5 levels of living is sinking to survival, survival to stability, stability to success, and success to significance. So the energy it takes to do survival is a lot. And I always say, if you use that same energy and channel it in a direction, then just think what great heights you can reach. But you remember old Kojak, that old actor with a lollipop and with hair as much as I have? He always said, just to survive is a lousy way to live. And I think we must get out of that survival mode, because it's actually sapping your energy. So survival is not the goal. It is to revive and then to thrive again afterwards.
Indeed. So, Gustav, what kind of growth do you see after the pressure has been lifted?
I love the concept of growth, because lots of people, after a bit of a troublesome period in their lives, they are stronger. And my old psychologist father
How will this problem solve itself? If you do what you've always done, you'll get what you've always gotten. And I see that people wait till the very, very last minute. They wait till before enforcement to apply for this process, which is actually the solution. And the sooner that you start with it, the sooner you're out of it. So it is an absolute solution. It works, the process works. We've seen it over a decade and a half, since I've been specializing in it. And I really can't understand why people would not opt for the solution whilst it's available.
Indeed, it makes sense. If you were facing financial difficulty, would you consider debt review?
Absolutely. We must look at the options. What else? Sequestration is sometimes an option, but there's no asset protection in sequestration. We want to put food on the table. And this debt review process prioritizes your reasonable living expenses. So once you're in the process, you will be able to feed your family. For me, the biggest risk would always be not to be able to do that, not to be able to put a roof over my family's head, not to be able to put food on the table. And that's not something I'd gamble with. If I run into financial hardships to the extent that there's a risk that I cannot provide food for my children, most certainly I'll apply for debt review as soon as it's possible, as soon as I realize that